The virtual reality space has been around for a very long time. It's actually a 50-year-old industry. Right now, head-mounted displays, virtual reality, it immerses your eyesight, but it doesn't immerse your body. No company has worked on that portion of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Pioneers Pathway podcast, joined as always by your two favorite podcasters, me, Shaurya, and my good friend, Mr. Villani. How are you doing, Liam?
I'm doing really well, thank you. How about you? It's a busy time of the year, right? December, Christmas, everyone's on holidays. Busy time of the year, but we've got a really exciting episode today, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Despite, it being such a busy time of year, we've been very fortunate to be joined by Mr. Kyle Doran today. How are you, Kyle?
I'm doing good. How are you guys?
Yeah, all well, Kyle, all well.
Not bad, not
So,
bad.
Kyle, do you want to just give our listeners a brief, introduction on what you do and your background?
My name's Kyle Doran. I am a startup entrepreneur. I entered the startup game about 5 years ago. Struck it out on my own, and it's been probably the most interesting 5 years of my life.
So, what motivated you to become an entrepreneur in the first place?
I was working the 9 to 5, working for a corporation, trying to climb a corporate ladder, and it just wasn't able to climb that ladder. Wanted to get to that CEO position, and I figured out, hey, I can do it right now if I just quit my job and call myself a CEO. It's kind of like the funny way of thinking about it. But no, my real passion and drive was in gaming, and I noticed kind of 8 years ago that hey, gaming is taking a relatively uh good path to where you're able to start monetizing and living and creating a family. There's content creators now that are making, 8 figures that, in the gaming space, in the competition space. So the industry itself is growing and maturing more and more and more. And so I decided, hey, why don't I take a crack at it? And that's what I did.
Look,
And
I
and
mean,
sort of growing up. Sorry, I was just
go
going to
for it,
say,
go for
sort of
it.
growing up. What was your story growing up? Did you have any entrepreneurial endeavors like in school, or what did you do growing up?
I was a gamer growing up. I was a nerd growing up. There was something that attracted me to computers and electronics and that nature. And so that was my kind of drive and passion. But at the time, in 2003, gaming was still pulled back. It was very, very drawn back. Hey, it's worthless. It's not. There were tournaments that were fifth place. For first place, the tournament was $100, and for fifth place, it was 2 Bitcoin. So like, if you compare it from like back then to now, it's very flip flopped, right? The where we are now in far as gaming and digital is becoming more and more and more prevalent in our society, and you can actually start making it. It wasn't back then, so my passion really like it just wasn't feasible to try and strike it out in gaming. Back in 2003.
So, obviously, leaving the 9 to 5 is motivation for many to go into entrepreneurship. But there are lots of challenges that are associated which people don't know of. So, what did you, encounter any similar challenges?
It's super challenging. Anything entrepreneur is super challenging. Hey, let me give up a protected paycheck and go, go for it. Someone else that's kind of procured a customer base and procured an audience, and uh, for me, it's been super scary. It's not easy. There's no way that it's easy. Nobody, entrepreneurship is it's all on your own, and no one. I mean, doing podcasts is kind of entrepreneurial in its own sense. So, I mean, probably some of you could probably share some of the same risks that most entrepreneurs take.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, the risk of failure, the risk of people laughing at you, that's very, evident, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
So, obviously, your business is heavily involved in technology and VR. So this has been something that's come about in the last, 5, 10 years. So have you noticed any particular challenges with adoption or anything industry specific?
As far as like the virtual reality space as a whole, or
Yeah, just the whole space. Because look, 5, 10 years back, nobody would have had any ideas that people be wearing these big headsets and So
well, so so I'll say, and I'm not sure necessarily kind of where your audience kind of comes from here, but the virtual reality space has been around for a very long time. It's actually a 50-year-old industry. So the
okay.
first head-mounted display 3D space was created. The sort of Democles is was the very first headset. And it was in the 1960s or
Oh,
1970s,
okay.
60s. So a lot of people are like, "Whoa, wait a minute, how has it been around for so long?" Then you had the Palmer, not Palmer Luckey. Palmer Luckey's 93, but before then you had the Jaron Lanier was came out. He was the godfather of VR. There's been so many godfathers of virtual reality. Um, we don't actually follow along with their lineage of what VR actually is. Right now, the net VR in general, we believe that we're in virtual reality right now, right? We were just talking about time zones and we're all across the entire world right now, but we're all connecting. And what are we connecting in? We call that virtual reality at the net VR, which kind of starts to make a complete huge like shift into something different. And it really focuses in on the difference between the virtual reality space and how the virtual reality space works. And it kind of shifts people's mindsets and perspectives away from just this one specific device that has a super high level of immersion. So, virtual reality in general, we struggle at the NetVR to kind of open up people's minds and ideas to just taking a step back and looking at what virtual reality is and removing that head-mounted display and then kind of really defining in and honing in on, hey, how can you change the space? How can you reinvent it? How can you look at it? And how long has it been out? That's a great question. A lot of people are like, well, when's virtual reality really coming? Well, it's kind of been around for about 50 years now to kind of circle back.
Maybe, Kyle, you'll be able to just maybe tell our listeners sort of the function that you guys want to do in the VR field, what you guys are seeking to do and sort of bring as value to the industry.
Yeah, so I mean, even within the virtual reality industry, when we started almost 6 years ago, it's the head-mounted display is the carrot. Um, Whenever you jump into a head-mounted display, and which most people call virtual reality, you are fully emerging your eyesight in the digital space. And that digital space is 3D. So whenever you jump into a head-mounted display, it's 3D, right? Whenever you jump on a computer, it's in 2D. When you use on a cell phone, it's 2D. But you're introducing yourself into this virtual space, uh, and we just call all of that's the reality of it, right? So I mean, we're not in an office right now. We're in each of our own offices, but we are in an office of Zoom right now, having this conversation. So it tries to focus in on how can you better understand the virtual reality space, and we think we have a pretty good eye line on it. I mean, there's our industry is rapidly changing. We now have metaverse, we have spatial computing, we have NFTs, we have all these different, AI. These are all virtual reality spaces, or terms that all are pointing to that same thing. We just use the term that's been around for 50 years is virtual reality.
So would you be able to say you offer a service? Is it a product, and sort of what kind of consumers are you looking to?
Well, so the NetVR specifically, obviously,
Yeah.
we can't change the entire world overnight. You can't do that with a tiny little startup. We found a very tight niche with users that use the virtual reality space the most. We
Okay.
found that if you understand virtual reality in general, it's number one. The industry is gaming. It's video games. Second comes education, and third, I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but it's education, gaming, uh, and yeah, keeps going back to education. Um, yeah, educate, yeah, training, whatever. They're the same thing, but there you could kind of see that those places, um, that industry of video gaming is where we tied our very first product in, and then we found the people that are gaming without head mounted displays, but also able to incorporate and include head mounted displays.
Okay.
And what do you think is the reason for, the increased adoption of VR in the past few years?
It's it, the amount of headsets. Meta has done a great job. Oculus has done an amazing job at kind of bringing in or lowering the cost point of that peripheral, that display device, which is brought around more adoption of people using um, head mounted displays. But at the same time, I mean, PCs, gaming, all of that is increasing exponentially. A lot of it you'll see is gaming on phones, right? A lot of people are just getting more and more and more sucked in. I think you have a lot of aging that is happening in general, and you're having more and more and more screen time. The younger and younger and younger individuals, I was capped at screen time for a little while. There's parents that are like, give him the iPad, give him the
I
iPad.
kids, isn't it? So I just want to sort of, follow up on that. So as you mentioned, that traditionally VR has been associated with gaming, and obviously yours mentioned education is the key use of it these days. But do you see there being any challenges with a system which has traditionally been used in gaming? Gaming is sort of has a negative connotation to it, isn't it? And obviously education is seen a complete 180, right? So do you see any challenges being associated with that? Using a system that's once considered for gaming in education?
It's so interesting that you have that huge flip flop from gaming. Wait a minute to education. Um, it's incredible. It's very, very weird that some people are like, well, hey, wait a minute. We can use these to gamify. I mean, if you look at it, there's gaming in educational school systems. At least I don't know if you guys had that experience where you guys had educational, you
We
were
weren't
playing
so
games in
fortunate.
school.
I think we're getting a bit older now, right? So I'm not too sure if VR was the big thing, but I can safely say so. I'm at a business school in Madrid, and we used VR headsets to practice giving speeches. And it is amazing. It's absolutely amazing, sort of the technology out there and what the opportunities it allows. But I just to draw on that, education's an interesting one because there's obviously a massive inequality in resources given to schools and educations. And VR headsets aren't cheap, are they? Do you think it's something which is widely accessible? And do you think there's still an issue, right, with these opportunities and these resources because they cost a lot, and the opportunity is just going to people with access to those resources?
Well, I mean, I'm starting to kind of think, and I don't know. I mean, you can find a head-mounted display now for, I mean, on the used market for $100. You know, you that's almost cheaper. That's cheaper than most laptops.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so
Why do you think that's the case? Is well, used markets obviously it's a used market. It's been used before, but do you think competitions out there? There's a lot of players in the manufacturing, which is just
no,
making prices go down.
that's the weird part is there really isn't. You have a very interesting, like weird dynamic. I look at it this way: head-mounted displays or VR in the general sense, it gets used for less than a second a day, per the United States head count population. Meanwhile, we're on our laptops, computers, or TV screens for over 8 hours. So head-mounted display adoption is still very, very, very niche. It's very, very, very small. There's not a lot of room for head-mounted displays. But 3D space, There's a ton of adoption in 3D space that people use their computers for gaming in 3D. You get a much more natural experience in a 3D video game than you do, say, on like a slider or just, just watching a YouTube video. If you're able to immerse yourself in that space, you can start to, oh, hey, let me go pick up that thing that they picked up on the screen. It becomes a wild kind of
Yeah.
experience.
So, obviously you mentioned that stat where VR, the actual headsets are used for less than 1 second a day. Why do you think that is? Do you think that's a cultural thing? Do you think it's because of the health concerns? Because there are a fair bit of health concerns surrounding VR. So just wanting to, gain an understanding of what you think the reason is.
Our perspective is it's a natural uh level of immersion. So you immerse yourself in a reality. We're stuck in real reality, is what we call it at the Net VR. We have to pull up another real reality, mixed reality, extended reality. Um, we only use two terms at our company: real reality and virtual reality. Getting immersed inside of the virtual reality space, when you take your eyesight and you completely close off all real reality and you only focus on the virtual space, it's very disconcerting to your body. And so that's why most people kind of reject it or push it off. You can even see another thing that distorts reality is glasses, right? Most people don't necessarily like wearing glasses. Like they like to have a good level or a high level of vision, but putting on a pair of just eyeglasses kind of makes them feel uncomfortable a little bit, right? It makes their body feel uncomfortable. Or even contact lenses, like they'd rather take those out at night because they're uncomfortable. Um, it's that same. It's weird when you try to pair those two kind of things together of headsets and then glasses, but it is real. I mean, a lot of people start to understand, hey, this is weird. It's immersing yourself in something. You're using a tool to immerse yourself in something that isn't natural to you.
And how do you see, the big players, Oculus, PlayStation, etc., Apple? How do you see them, going about and mitigating and countering all these issues?
So immersion, that's a great question. I don't see a lot of them focusing in on immersion. I think they've used in the past, higher and higher resolution displays. That's really kind of the main one that they've focused in on. But the one big thing for us that we've noticed, and we're not a manufacturer for a display. We only deal with software. We don't touch any hardware. We're device agnostic hardware, but when you go into hardware, you need to understand how is it working with the person? How is it working with the person's hardware, their body? So right now, head-mounted displays, virtual reality, it immerses your eyesight, but it doesn't immerse your body. No company's worked on that portion of it. They've really just focused in and honed in on the sight and the visual aspects to try and overcome. But it's you're shooting it's a very difficult shot. You're not using the right tools to be able to actually make people feel more comfortable in that space.
And as a software developer in this field, how does that make you feel?
Ooh, quit. Well, sorry, can you ask the question a little bit better?
So, so obviously there appears to be sort of a gap in the market, right? So, as a software developer, do you feel as if, the hardware manufacturers should be pushing, more towards that gap, or and has that affected your business personally?
So for us, we're only in the software space. But a lot of hardware companies, like if you look at Apple, they release their Apple Vision Pro, right? They have to come out with the software as well. I think if more hardware companies focus in more on the hardware and stay with the hardware, they could potentially have a decent time. But a lot of companies have to do both. They have to create the experience as well as create the hardware, and that probably just rips and tears companies apart. I think in the grand scheme of things. But if you can have a company that only focuses in on the hardware and tries to get rid of those problems, that would probably be better. I think you might get a little bit better, more advancement potentially.
So
And
essentially,
maybe
go for it, Pete.
No, no, no. You go for it. You go for it. I
Okay,
think mine's moving on from that. Yep.
okay, sure. So essentially, basically, what you're suggesting is let's focus on you know specialization. So you guys focus on the hardware, and companies such as the NetVR let us focus on the software, and that way we could all thrive as an industry.
Yeah, well, in the head-mounted display industry, yeah, yes.
Cool. I just wanted to sort of move on and look more into the long term, the future. And obviously, and I want to talk about sort of the future of the VR industry, but I also want to hit back into the company, running a business, and your startup. How is that? It's not easy, right? And with niches like this, it's hard to be able to scale up a business across the board, but even more so here. And how do you see this sort of developing in the future? Do you want to compete with the big players, or do you really want to maintain your sort of the uniqueness in your approach?
There's a lot of questions in there. I'm not sure if
I
there's
what no, let's
which
be
one do you
honest.
want me to
Maybe
start with.
yeah.
It's
Let's
fully
talk just
loaded.
the future. The future. What's your future plans? What's your future looking like for your company?
Uh, So the NetVR is a bootstrapped industry. It's a bootstrap software play. We've been at it for about 5 years. We built the prototype in 2 years. We started, trying to figure out, hey, how can we get this project funded? How can we get into revenue? Where we burned all of our capital within the first 2 years. We didn't have much to start with. We don't have an uncle that's bankrolling us or friends and family that are the first founding team was just a small little couple guys in a garage. We've turned into 35 volunteers now. So in the last 3 years, we've basically been a zero capital software startup, which software, as everybody knows, takes time. It takes super talented experts to be able to develop your software application. We've been out trying to seek funding and get and getting out there. But it's difficult. And the only way we've been able to do it is the vision and the people that we've got on our team. They believe in the vision. They understand this gaming space is coming, and they want to partake in it. So we've been able to our vision has been able to keep us alive for the last 3 years, solely on the vision and passion of individuals, which has been super awesome to see. People want to get involved and want to bring kind of our vision to others. Um, so that's kind of the humbling side of it. However, it goes back to, hey, Kyle, how are you able to eat? Great question. We're still kind of working on that. Hopefully, we'll be able to get into getting into revenue soon.
So do you think there's other areas of the VR industry or tech in general that you want to tackle, or is it something that you want to keep as a niche?
Again, for us, we go back to we call this what we're doing right now virtual reality. So
Yeah.
for us, I mean, to keep it a niche, the head-mounted display arena, I think is interesting, but I think as more and more generations are exposed to 3D space or video games that are in 3D, and it goes across multiple devices, more and more people will take on the virtual reality space or will adopt it and start using it, right? Our screen times are always increasing, so I don't see it going anywhere soon. It's not going to go away. I guess it's only going to increase as time goes on.
And going back to your own experiences as an entrepreneur, so it's obviously very challenging, and we've covered that before. So how do you keep yourself motivated in such times when during downturns, whatever? Because it's tough.
That kind of gets down to like who I am. You have good days and you have bad days. You just try. It's tough. I'm not gonna lie. It's tough. You just keep going. I don't know how. You just keep going. I guess till the money runs out. I guess.
So it's just a matter of just keep pushing, never giving up.
It really is. I mean, you just focusing in and there's good things and bad things that happen every day in entrepreneurship. To me, it's just exacerbated. Or it's just more. It's just a lot more when you have those good days, when you have those bad days, I'm sure you guys have good podcasts. You guys have bad podcasts. That guy was awesome. That guy wasn't so good. You just focus in on the good times and try and remember and stick with those, and that helps you, I think, get a little bit further.
And obviously now you've got a 35 volunteers. How do you ensure they keep the same vision as you have?
Well, it's all about if you've ever run a volunteer program or anything like that, it's an interesting thing. Hey, they're there to volunteer. So if they're there to volunteer, they want to be there. They enjoy whatever it is that you're doing. I've run volunteer networks in the past, just like cleanups and things, back in my hometown. Just being there means that you want to instill your time, but as soon as things get hard, I mean, you're volunteer, it's immediately, hey, let me step back, right? So it's just about making sure that you're providing the right tasks to the right individuals that want to tackle those tasks. And there's a plethora of individuals out there they just need experience. They just need work experience. The software game right now is very, 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 the software world in general is very, very interesting with a lot of layoffs in gaming. We're able to capitalize on that talent because people are laid off and they want to keep their skills sharp. The only thing we can do right now is volunteer for us. You're able to get those volunteers and you're able to get that time. So we have fallen kind of in a weird time in a weird niche where we're able to survive.
So obviously, I did have a couple of questions to do with VR. I know we sort of touched upon this earlier. How hard has it been for you to change the definition of VR in people's minds? Because I know me and Liam ourselves, we're both constantly we refer to VR as the headset, right? And I'm sure others do. But as you've told us many times today, it's not. I mean, it's so much bigger. So have you had any challenges in getting that message across to people?
100%. We always get told no, 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 no. We've actually been kicked out of the industry. Not kicked out, but a lot of people are like, "No, that's stupid. That's XRs." So in the VR, MR, AR space, they started calling it XR. They have which just confuses people. Large companies that have the ability with large marketing teams, metaverse came around. That metaverse term came around, and then even when Apple dipped their toe in, they stayed away from all VR companies and they went to spatial computing, was what they called it. All of it dabbles around the same thing of three-dimensional gaming. It's 3D gaming. It's a first-person perspective type of video game, and that is 3D space. You're not scrolling up and down on a screen, which that's 2D VR in our perspective. You're moving in and out and through the space, which it's just a shift or just a pivot of the way you go in a screen. But it's very challenging for a lot of people. What's also interesting though is the challenge for the elder generation. It's much more difficult to understand. When I hand the idea over to somebody in kind of the younger generation, they get it instantly. And it's so easy for them to understand. They're like, why isn't there more of this in the market? So we're at a very pivotal point.
Do you think that's a barrier which can be overcome, or do you think it's just education for the older generation? Because it's not just VR. There's a lot of technology which just wasn't around when they were growing up, right? I've seen and I know from the UK, VR has been piloted for issues such as like social isolation, but also I'm pretty sure I've heard of projects with sort of Alzheimer's dementia patients and things like that. So there's a lot of areas where people of all ages and backgrounds can really sort of have some value out of it.
I mean, I don't want to get too, I don't know how you guys' podcast is, but getting too political. But I mean, it really is. You have a lot of wealth and control and money and power, right? I got to be able to feed my developers. My developers haven't been able to eat. They're all volunteers, right? You have a lot of money and power in the elder generation that doesn't necessarily, they typically push back in this space. It's gaming. If gaming and entertainment is the number one VR application, that's not helpful for building somebody's house or
Yeah.
developing something putting food on people's tables. Like within that space, that doesn't happen. It can, and I would definitely caveat that, hey, I could play a video game that controls a robot that produces food for individuals that then gets in a car that's robotically controlled by a human being that's there is room to grow, but you do have kind of a centralized power and a centralized kind of amount of wealth that's not opening up to the next generation that's taking over and really honing in and using this virtual space. um I do see social media specifically, again, that's a virtual reality space in my mind, is not social. It is very much you're just watching past videos of individuals. You're potentially learning all on your own. But if you look at social gaming, you look at the first person perspective type of um, battle arena, you're with another 100 live people and you guys are communicating. And there are awesome things that happen within that space. You'll have people that are just playing video games and crying on each other's shoulders. They're playing the video game, but they're talking about what happened in their daily life. That's social connection. Scrolling on social media is not social connection. Playing video games with your friends is social connection, and that is healthy. But a lot of people just can't quite connect the dots and be like, you can't have a social experience. You got to go sit on the couch and play video games. That's the complete. There's a twist there that I think's happening. That just the elder generation, just because they never got exposure to it, they just don't understand it, so they push it away.
Just another sort of follow-up question on that. So VR has been expanding rapidly. We mentioned a couple of uses, gaming obviously being the most famous one, education. Do you think there are like any unexplored industries where it can be used?
So, as far as like the full immersion, the full immersive industry, or
Let okay, yeah, let's just go for that. The full immersive industry.
yeah, if there are a lot of use cases. Full immersion. So definitely in psychology and health, there are a lot of kind of use cases within the healthcare system. When you have a doctor that can get fully immersed inside of a CAT scan, or can look at a bone in 3D, it helps to be able to kind of see like, hey, where's this fracture going before they get in. So there's the ability for a doctor to get more immersed inside of this area of a picture that looks like in real life, so that way when they go in real life they'll be able to know in 3D what that bone is doing right now, instead of just seeing a 2D picture and they'll be like, well, I think it's going to be this, versus seeing a 3D picture. It just helps give the doctor a much better perspective on what they're going in for. So in healthcare, I think is the second one, that, or the third one behind gaming and education, that comes to mind. Um, as far as getting fully immersed, we could send pictures and robots down to, I don't know if it's too early, but like the Titanic. Instead of sending real people down to the Titanic, you can send a camera down that's a 360-degree camera, and you can get fully immersed in a live instance down there with, through a camera feed, which would be a lot safer. You can get a lot more views. You can get a lot more people that are there that get to see it. It's safer to be in virtual reality than to do things in real reality for the person. So there is safety in the virtual reality space. A lot of people might not see that right off the bat, but having that fully immersive really allows you to be there and be present in that space. So there probably are way more use cases that I'm just not thinking of at the moment. Going to space travel. All you got to do is send a camera out there, and you're able to see or be there. Yeah, those would be some of the cases.
I'm sure Elon would love that space idea.
Yep, there you go.
Look,
Of course, of
obviously,
course.
okay, Kyle, in the interest of time, I'm going to quickly move on to our rapid fire section. We call it the investor's call. So, are you ready?
Go for it.
Okay, biggest myth about entrepreneurship.
Wait, is that a biggest myth?
Yeah, the biggest myth about entrepreneurship.
Well, venture capital.
Okay, what entrepreneur you look up to and why?
Uh, I want to say Brian Chesky off the top of my head.
Okay, and why?
Just the way he was able to run his team.
Okay. One thing you wish you knew early in your career.
I needed a lot more money to start the project I wanted to start.
Okay. The most challenging part about being an entrepreneur?
Hearing a lot of no's.
And the best advice you've ever received?
Just keep going.
And last one, your biggest regret?
I haven't regretted anything. I that's a tough one. Uh, yeah, launching without money.
Fair enough. Look, Kyle, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Do you want to give our listeners, a bit of information as to where they can reach out to you or hear about the NetVR story?
Yeah, so the NetVR story, I typically share it on LinkedIn all the time. My most active platform is kind of LinkedIn. It's adjacent to the gaming space. Our application is in early beta. If you do want it, or you do want to jump in the space or try it out, you can find more information over at thenetvr.com. But if you're more interested in the entrepreneurial journey or just kind of want to hang out, LinkedIn is kind of where I get to socially converse about the project.
Well, look, Kyle, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. We've learned so much about VR. We'll make sure that we, from now on, address it as the immersion rather than just the headset.
Awesome. Love it.
Great, thank you so much.